Hey, everybody. Welcome back again to season 2 of Working on the Dad Pod. We had some technical difficulties a minute ago when, after 40 minutes in, we realized we didn't hit record. So, this is consider it a much tighter, more fun season premiere than you could have gotten had you gotten the raw deal. As you all hopefully remember, all millions of you, I am Ethan. Here is my co-host Alex. We are back by popular demand for season 2 of this great podcast. And since Alex remembered in the dress rehearsal, I'm going to steal the memory now. We want to do a better job this season of making sure you all are reminded to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube. We need that. We love that. We want you to see our faces because they're great, aren't they? We also, if you are not the visual learner or listener and you want to listen to us in your car, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. We need you to help this podcast grow. We need you to let us know what we could be doing better. And we are so happy that you're here. And we just want to expand this party a little more. So with that, here's Alex.
Yeah, and some of the ways I just wanted to add that you can do that, liking and subscribing on YouTube, but turning on the notifications, you will know when we have posted a new video on YouTube. If you use Spotify, also subscribe on Apple Podcasts and download an episode or two if you want to. But download your episodes, share them with friends, leave reviews, do all that great stuff. That'll help us out so much. But it's great to be back.
Really well. It's great to be back again. And
yeah, I would like to contend that it was not 40 minutes of fake recording. We had 15 minutes of tech debugging before we messed up the tech for 25 minutes. Yeah. So I would like to correct the record and defend my honor as the person that didn't realize I had to click the button twice to confirm that I was recording. And now this big red banner in the corner of my screen that our viewers won't be able to see is telling me that I didn't screw it up again.
That's true. I am seeing that as well, and I'm very happy to be here. So a few changes for season 2. We are trying some new things. You may remember from season 1, we would do our highs and lows, each 4 little stories. We're switching that to 1 story of the week from both of us. You will still be hearing, I don't know if every episode, but you will still be hearing our journeys on working on the dad bods, hence the pun that created the name of this show. And also, we may jazz up a few things with the layout. We may try to bring on some new voices. We're going to do a better job of ensuring that we are sharing our sources. And really, we're trying to go from amateurs to professionals in season 2.
We're trying to go to better amateurs. Let's be real.
Like Olympic amateurs with sponsorships and medals and stuff.
I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say no. I don't know that it's my expectation, but I wouldn't say no.
Sure. But we're trying. I never said we'd get there. I said we're trying.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. But I'm excited to be back. I'm trying to regarner the enthusiasm from 30 minutes ago. But I am excited for this. So let's get into it. We are, as Ethan mentioned, we're sort of changing up the format, and we are now doing story time, which is just 1 win or loss to sort of consolidate. I know this is a bit of a fan favorite. I've heard from a few of you that it's a favorite segment, but we are now going to move into story time, and I will go first. It is going to be my son's 2nd birthday this weekend, and I'm very excited. It's crazy how time flies, how we've gone from being a 1-child household to all of a sudden having a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and it's chaotic, but he's full on in the terrible twos. He has always been, I would say, a more passive, docile, observant child than my daughter. And I've always loved that about him. And relatively, even like age to age, still the same. But it doesn't matter because there's not a threshold of terrible twos where you feel good about it and you're like, this is totally manageable and totally sane. But the kid loves to throw things left and right, and he's got a cannon And so I've been constantly for weeks now, like I've had to pull him aside and tell him to stop throwing things at me, at his mom, at his sister, but also kind of give him the old nudge, like, "Hey, Slugger, that was a heck of a toss. We're gonna get you fielding grounders in the backyard. Don't you worry. Just as soon as you get out of this timeout that you have rightfully earned," kind of thing. I did. I sent him to his room. I went with him. He's 2. I'm just like, "We got to talk about this. I need you separated. Don't throw. Don't throw." That kind of thing. But it is tough sometimes when you have those competing interests of like, you got to know when to channel it. Got to know when to bring out the cannon and when to not assault members of your family. It's a fine line.
Yeah. I too am anti-assault. That's good. But I'm also pro harnessing talent at its core and using it to its full potential. So I'm really excited to see how you toe the line with this situation. You mentioned, go ahead.
No, I don't know. I'll see. I think it's going to be playing catch in the backyard and then, telling him it stops now at the door kind of thing. Yeah. We'll see how it goes from there.
Yeah. I love that. And you mentioned a second ago, terrible twos. I just want to say that my daughter, my 4-year-old daughter actually skipped terrible twos, but she was a full-on 3-nager and is now a wild 4-nado. And her tantrums are quite damaging. So, I think it's pretty fitting. What I want to say for story time is I have 2 daughters, a 4-year-old and now an almost 18-month-old. And my 18-month-old has begun to sort of start talking. She is approximating words. She is communicating verbally. It's really rewarding to see because, as I mentioned in season 1, my now 4-year-old is a true pandemic baby. She was born in November of 2019. She spent the first 22 months of her life at home with us. It wasn't until she started preschool where she went from roughly 8 to 10 words to full sentences in, a matter of weeks. And, she didn't have the need to verbalize her communication because she was so good at telling us what she needed non-verbally that this is kind of our first experience with our second kid, watching the words develop, having her trying to communicate and interact with kids at a much younger age outside the family. So it's a lot of fun to see. And her favorite word that she says perfectly is actually ECHO, which is what we named our Amazon Music playing product. In the dress rehearsal, I named the other one. So I'm trying to spare all of you all from having it turn on. But every morning when I'm getting them ready for preschool, they will say, or my little one will say ECHO, and then the 4-year-old will say ECHO, play Axel F by Crazy Frog. And that is how we start the morning. Going nuts. That's not for fair. You can't do anymore. Otherwise, we're violating fair use. But
sorry, Miami came out there.
There you go, right? Go Canes. We're terrible at sports. Anywho, what I will say is we're back. We are ready to share with you. We are ready to talk about things that happen in our own lives. And with a very forced segue, unlike what happened in our dress rehearsal, let's get into the topic, shall we?
Yeah. So for those, our goals this season, I think, are to name the topic up front, get that juicy behind the scenes subscription info down there. But we are talking about death.
Well said.
With kids.
Yes.
So the idea of a loved one, or maybe someone they casually know, passing away, not using the term passing away as we'll get to, but dying. And I screwed that up right from the get-go. Here's how you talk to kids, and it's not like this, guys.
Right.
But talking to them about death. And one of our goals, as Ethan mentioned, is to cite our sources. We found out in our dress rehearsal that we both read, firstly, a NPR article about death and how to talk to your kids about it. And it referenced a Sesame Street episode with Big Bird in it, and says that this episode is a masterclass. We're going to put that episode, season, and number in the show notes so that you guys can find that. But the basic premise was to be direct, not sugarcoat language. Now, I think there's a fine line between sugarcoating and getting grotesque. Don't leave out details that they don't need, but also don't use language like, oh, they went on a long trip, or they passed away, or they're resting, they've gone to a better place, like all this kind of stuff, the kind of things you might say to a kid, when their dog dies. Oh, went to go live on a farm, those kind of things. Be honest and direct. It doesn't mean you have to be cruel. It doesn't mean you have to be overly blunt. I think there's that line, but it's the idea of saying what you mean, because otherwise, if you're sugarcoating it, then you're just kicking the can down the road and accepting any potential consequences that come from your kids not dealing with these emotions a little bit earlier as they may be feeling them.
Yeah. So the reason we chose this topic is, the reason I chose this topic and Alex agreed was because very recently my 4-year-old has been asking a lot about death. Most recently because a few weeks ago, one of my friend's dads died suddenly. It was very sad, and she had some questions. However, it kind of started a couple months ago when I was putting my daughter to bed, and she regularly at bedtime will ask questions that she knows the answers to, just to, delay bedtime. But it started with this. So my mother, to her, is Glamma, because she did not ever want to be grandma. She wanted to be a glamorous grandma, so hence Glamma. My wife's mom is Grandma. So she says, who's Glamma's mommy? And I told her, that, it's Savta. For those of you who don't know, Savta is Hebrew for the word grandma. So now we've delineated Savta, Glamma, and grandma. Anyway, so she goes, right. So who's Glamma's daddy? And I said, well, this. It is my grandpa. He was my grandpa. Your great grandpa. He died a year plus before you were born, and you were named after him. And she said, oh, he died, so he's in the hospital. And I said, no, he's in a cemetery. And she said, what's that? And before having read this article on NPR, it turns out that I accidentally did most of the right thing. So I said to her, well, when you're Jewish, within 2 days of dying, you get put in a box that they call a coffin, and then they dig a hole at the cemetery, and they put the box in the hole, and then they cover it with dirt, and you have a funeral where you talk about the person, and then they're dead. And her takeaway was, oh, so the box has a top on it. And I said, yeah, that's good for night one.
We can dirty.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, that was night one. Then my wife went in a little later to kiss her goodnight after the little one was put to sleep. She came downstairs and was like, so you told her about death and dying in cemeteries and you didn't talk to me first? And I said, well, she asked me a question. I was caught off guard. I answered honestly. And then for the next few nights, over a couple of weeks, couple nights a week, she would ask about my grandfather being in a box in the cemetery. So we've had this discussion many times. But what's nice to know is that based on how Alex outlined in that NPR article, I also found a really good article from Children's Hospital in Colorado, where really it is about being honest and not sugarcoating it, like Alex said, but more so using active words, not being passive, sort of like good writing, not using passive voice. You don't want to say passing away, moving on. You want to say died, is dead, and then giving them time to internalize the word, and then you explain to them what that really means and what the concept of death is. Since then, I'll get into this after Alex has a chance to talk about how he has dealt with the conversation of death with his daughter. But there are also, in addition to Sesame Street, other fun ways, well, not fun, other ways where you can introduce media and popular culture and opportunities to let them experience death, not just through a conversation. But let me kick it to you, man.
Yeah, I think using tools is helpful when you use them in the right way, in that vein
Sure.
of doing it. But we had a similar experience with a great-grandfather to my daughter who passed away about the time that my daughter was 2, maybe a little bit before. She had met this man. He lived 40 minutes away. We saw him a couple times a year. During COVID, she was a year and a half, and we met them out in the driveway. She's dressed in a flamingo outfit, and they gave her like a Quaker oatmeal bar, and then she ran away across their front yard. And that is the most significant memory I have of my daughter with her great-grandfather, who's my wife's grandfather. And you would think the way she processed his death, that they were best friends, right? And that it wasn't the case. I mean, they met, knew each other. He had Alzheimer's. She wasn't even 2 yet. There wasn't a lot of like memory formation happening between these two. But as she would get older, processing it, especially when she was with my mother-in-law, the daughter of the deceased, she would quite often bring up how sad it made her, right? And my wife and I really tried to do a good job, kind of like you, stumbling into doing some of the things that the experts recommend, but trying to be direct with her and trying to say, it's okay. I understand that you feel sad. That's okay. And there was that part of me that understood from her perspective that she didn't really know him. I don't think that the emotion she was feeling was sad, but I think that there were people in her life, especially, that would validate those feelings in a very extremely nurturing way. And she appreciated that attention. So I think she was sort of, I don't want to make it sound like she was intentionally being manipulative because she was like 3 years old, but I think she was understanding, if I say this, people give me hugs and make me feel better, even though I'm not really feeling that bad. And so it was an interesting dichotomy where I think my wife and I tried to sort of be direct with her. And then after a few months of it, we got to the point to tell her, this can be hurting people's feelings, right? Because she's saying this to people who it was their grandfather or their father or their spouse or whatever, and actually had a lot of memories with them and actually were very, torn up about end of life, about death. And we had to sort of say, you've got to stop talking about this so much and put our foot down at a certain point after we felt like we were well clear of like, you have processed and you understand. And now I feel like you're pushing a button again and again because the button is always giving you the reward you want.
Right.
So we need to kind of stop pressing this button and hoping for that reward.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned some other things you wanted to talk about.
Oh, yes.
Sorry. I was kicking it back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Kicked, caught. Wait, no, mixing sports. Anyway, so yeah, one of the things that we have recently started, we're not done yet, is, as you know from last season, we're a big Daniel Tiger house. But my daughter has every once in a while wanted to watch a movie that has either been Frozen or Beauty and the Beast. Those are the only two movies she has like actually sat through.
What else is there?
Yeah, true. Two great choices. So the other day she said, I want to watch Frozen again. And I stopped and I said, no, we're going to watch Coco. And my wife was like, why? And I said, well, she's been asking about death a lot. So why don't we watch Coco? Because one, it's an excellent movie. And two, it's an opportunity for us to expose her to another culture that indicates that death does not necessarily mean it's over. And for those of you who have not seen Coco, the premise is about a young boy named Miguel who accidentally ends up in the land of the dead, during Dia de los Muertos, which in Mexico is November 1st. It's the Day of the Dead, and it's the day after Halloween. And basically, the movie is showing the connection between the land of the dead and the land of the living, and how just because a person dies, and in this case, it's all ancestors and older relatives, which ties back into the great-grandfather theme that Alex and I have both shared, where it really can show her that death is not always a sad or bad thing,
right?
That it's okay to grieve, but there might be more. And so we, are about halfway through that movie. Her schedule has gotten in the way of some things, but ultimately, so far, I think she's enjoying the movie, and we are happy to have this visual aid to help us with the death discussion.
And that is a really nice segue into an article that I read on Fatherly, which was one of the other resources. And this article was mentioning sort of some cursory guidelines on how to sort of start these conversations with kids based on their age. And for the 3 to 5 year old range, where both of our older daughters are, they mentioned this idea that in media, and I'm not specifically calling out Coco because you could be calling out just about anything, but this idea of character deaths not seeming permanent or not seeming always sad, especially if it's a bad guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing like this character could be revived, or it doesn't feel like that big of a deal. Imagine, right, if you will, where Gaston gets thrown off the roof in Beauty and the Beast. And that's the last time you ever see Gaston in the movie. And you're like, he is dead. But then you turn it back on and you watch the movie again, and there Gaston is again. And as 30-something-year-old men, we both understand what's happening there. But the mechanics to a 3 or 4 year old is probably like, Gaston's not dead, just means I need to start the movie over. Right. And so you have to get on their level a little bit and let them ask questions. But I think the biggest thing we can understand is that it's going to take time. And that's what I gathered from personal experience, and then was backed up by the psychologists that I read, Psychology Today, NPR, Fatherly. All the sources seem to be saying, take the time, because kids aren't necessarily going to have all of their questions lined up the moment you get done telling them the news. When you break it to them, they're like, how did this happen? What happened? Is everybody doing okay? Is there anything I can do? This is not telling it to somebody who is an adult who feels equipped to handle this knowledge and react to this knowledge in some sort of way. But that's why your daughter's first question is, oh, he's in the hospital, because 1, it doesn't seem permanent to her. And then 2, her second question is, so the box has a top on it? Okay. We're good, right? She's processing in her own way, and then she's going to take several more days to continue to ask questions. So I think if I had to give advice based on the resources that I've seen, one common thread is to not walk out of that initial conversation and think, I nailed that. That was awesome. They didn't have any questions. I must have done a fantastic job of explaining. Instead, go, death is a complicated concept that we don't fully understand and grasp as an adult, so let's not put that kind of pressure on a little kid to completely get it and be ready to answer our questions. But yeah, I think you can do it. I think you can do it with humanity and dignity, and also understanding. I think it makes you more relatable to them if you come into that conversation going, I don't have all the answers. Like, I can't tell you with 100% certainty. For those of you that have some unwavering faith in what you believe the afterlife is, fantastic. I'm not here to go down that road of the different belief systems and what they believe. But I don't think I could sit in a room with my kids and say, I am 100% certain with every fiber of my being that when you die, this is exactly what will happen to you and what you will experience, right? I don't have some frame of reference for that. And I can't say that. And so I think humanizing yourself and saying, I don't have all the answers on this, but it is tough and your feelings are real, I think is a really good place to start.
Yeah. And it's also okay to get emotional yourself and cry and be vulnerable. That's also what the articles and resources we've read said. And I mentioned it in the dress rehearsal, but I do want to reiterate here in this real recording that, just a reminder, Alex and I are not experts. We are not out there publishing resources on parenting websites. People do not consult us for our expertise. We are two guys, two dads who have found that there's a lot of stuff that we could be experiencing in a community, not necessarily by ourselves. We share what we did in our own lives, the questions that we have about our own kids, and what we think worked and didn't work. And we can consult research out there that may or may not help us be better fathers in the future. This is one situation where when we were kind of caught off guard with the questions about death, we inadvertently did do what the experts said. So go us.
Right.
That said, we are not experts. We are providing you resources that we found helpful after the fact. But this podcast is an opportunity for dads, Alex and I, any of you who are listening, subscribe, want to comment, be part of the episode, to really talk about things in a way, in a venue that really isn't out there much. When we started this podcast last year, we found that most of the resources for parenting are geared towards moms, which makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
For years and years and generations, mothers were the primary parents. But Alex and I saw this opening and we wanted to fill it. So we're so happy you're all here to listen. And that's just the reminder as we go into season 2 that Alex and I are not experts. We're just two dads trying to make it by.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic reminder. I appreciate that. And it's always helpful to give maybe a little more airtime than a few social media trolls deserve. But here we are. Sure. That said, the other thing that has come up with me with my kid, I'll just say my kid, because my son has not had this experience. He's obviously at the same age my daughter was when her great-grandfather passed away. He doesn't have a lot of frame of reference for this stuff. So the conversation I've had with my daughter, though, we've had other instances in our family where we had a family member diagnosed with cancer. They are since healthy. Won't divulge who, but it was somebody that my daughter saw enough to that we didn't want to say anything. Because, and I think there's a difference, right? I think there's a difference between talking about death, which is a very final absolute thing, and talking about the possibility of death, especially because what ended up happening with this is this person is now cancer free. And as far as I know, so this is not the kind of thing that you wanted to tell her, because we'd had experiences where she would be at church or something and she found out that someone had cancer and that someone died. And then she started making this association with cancer means you are going to die. And in 2024, that's not necessarily the case for everybody in every case. And we want cancer to end and all that good stuff. But we couldn't have some simple conversations with her because of how we were afraid to react. And I still look back on that. I'm like, I don't know if we handled it in the right way. You know, all's well that ends well. We got out of it without ever having to have the conversation, but having to sit there and go, okay, at what point in this process, what piece of information are we going to get where we have to go, hey, listen, this person that you know has cancer. And do we tell them when it feels like it's going to be on, the downhill? Which it thankfully never got to, but are we going to tell them when they're heading towards the end and then further reinforce the belief that cancer equals death and then create a vicious cycle? That's one where I'm still stuck for, if this particular person has it or somebody else gets cancer or having something like that, of having those kind of conversations with either one of my kids about the possibility of it and how to broach that. So that'll be an interesting one that if you have dealt with that, I would love to hear in the comments on YouTube of how you broach that one.
Well said. Yeah,
have you ever had to deal with like potentially terminal illness or terminal illness with your kids?
Yeah. So when my daughter was 2.5, my aunt passed away. She had been dealing with cancer. My daughter did get the opportunity to FaceTime her one more time when I was right before she passed away, when she was essentially in hospice. She didn't really understand. She was definitely too young. I mean, I was honest with her and I said, she died and you're not going to be able to see her anymore. But we still love her and miss her. And she said, okay. And that was kind of it. And, she likes to look at old pictures of when she was a baby. And my aunt was one of the first people to visit her in the hospital before we went home. So I do say, do you remember her? And she'll say yes. And I say, and she says, why don't I see her? And I said, well, she died. And, so I bring it up, but there haven't been the same kind of follow-up questions as there have been with my grandpa, who she never met, and my friend's dad, because that's just been the most recent. So I can't say we've had to do the terminal illness discussion yet, even though I have brought it up.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are some of the other things that you wanted to talk about dealing with death and kids? I mean, have you ever had to have the conversation? Because I think this is the last point that I really wanted to discuss, was the idea of our mortality. Geez, couldn't get that one out. Our mortality as parents, and how we talk to our kids about the fact that everybody grows old and everybody eventually is going to die. It is one of the certainties of life is death. And we've had those kind of conversations. They came up around her great grandfather, where it was just like, well, everybody's going to die. You mean mommy and daddy are going to die? Well, I don't want you guys. Well, it's not going to happen tomorrow. When will it happen? Well, if I knew that, I wouldn't go to work that day or whatever it is, I don't know.
So my daughter did have I said that my friend's dad died. Then she asked her mom if I died. And then she asked if she's going to die. And, we said that, everybody dies. Dying is part of life. Hopefully it doesn't happen until you're really, really old. Then it was, so only old people die. And then we said, well, not always. There are some tragedies that happen, but you're not going to die until you're really old, and hopefully we're not. And so I don't think we handled it well. We just handled it honestly. And
I don't think there's a way to nail that conversation. If I'm having been in those trenches, I don't know that you can come out of that clean.
Yeah. So we, I forget what the third part of the Venn diagram was that our mutual friends sent in the group chat, but basically toddlers and the Backstreet Boys are there at Tell Me Why. If you're familiar with that song, Tell Me Why ain't nothing but a fair use. Anyway, so the goal is, or not the goal, the point is that when a kid keeps asking you why, and you need to stop mid-thought to pivot and answer the next why, you're going to get yourself caught up and tongue-tied, and you're going to backtrack on some things. And that's what happened with me. And so dealing with our own mortality, I tried to do it in an honest way. She knows that I'm going to die someday. I hope for my sake, it's not for a very long time. And actually on Monday, thank you. And on Monday, actually, we were walking to preschool, and she knew that it was one of her friends' birthdays that day and that there would be cupcakes. And she said, am I going to have more birthdays? And I said, yeah, hopefully at least 80, and yeah, I didn't want to overshoot it. I didn't want to undershoot it.
Sure.
Yeah, so I said, hopefully at least.
If she's holding you to that on her like 79th birthday, like, Dad, got at least 4 more.
No, yeah. You know what I mean? So, so I guess that was in a way dealing with her own mortality, asking if she was going to have more birthdays. So I think I nailed that one.
Yeah. Well, philosophy professors. Yeah. That was the third one. That was the third Venn diagram. Tell me why. Okay. Philosophy professors. Gotcha. I had to look it up while you were saying because it was killing me.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Why I didn't know. But yeah, I think I'd wrap up this conversation by saying we'll throw a couple articles in there. There are a lot of good resources out there from just how-to guides from psychologists, essentially, of how to have these kind of conversations. But I'd love to hear from you guys some of these caveats, right? We talked about the cancer diagnosis, our own mortality. I'm sure death is such a weird thing, right? It's so unique every time it happens. And so I'd love to hear in the YouTube comments if any of you guys have some unique experiences. Ethan, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
I actually do. It just kind of dawned on me. I do want to talk about the first time I kind of understood death. I was 6 years old, and it was the first time that I ever saw my dad crying. And it was because my grandpa had died, his father. And, maybe it wasn't the first time I ever saw my dad cry, but it's the first time I remember seeing my dad cry.
Sure.
And I didn't really know why. And then my mom explained to me that my grandfather had died and that I wouldn't get to see him anymore, and that my dad was sad because his dad was gone. And, here I am today on hosting a podcast about being a dad and talking about death. And it dawned on me that it was my dad's dad who died that taught me about death. So I just wanted to get all meta and mind F us all with that memory, which just came to me.
I don't have like a signature memory. I think that's partly because my maternal grandfather passed away about a year before I was born. So it's kind of one of those things that it was, obviously I'm close with my mom, and obviously my mom was very close with her dad. And so obviously it came up. So I'm sure we had some conversation about what death means at some point, but I very early on just sort of understood, okay, this person was in their lives and now they're not there anymore. And I'm never going to get to meet them because this death thing happened before I was born. So yeah, it's a long way of saying I don't have one of those moments.
Gotcha.
But should we work on the dad bod?
Yeah. Again? So we should. It is February 22nd, 2024, and I've got a long way to go to reach my goal. As you all know, I try to do my weigh-in right before the episode, but always full nude. So you all get that visual. I give you the truth. I give you the naked dad bod weigh-in. Unfortunately,
as a former Hanes underwear commercial star,
you said it.
He was a child. He did not get nude. I've seen the commercial. He was in full clothes on a slide. Please don't come after me. Whoever's trying to catch a predator that ain't not here. No.
You kind of just brought that onto yourself. Anyway.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Why. You feel free to edit that out. Anyway.
No, I'm going to leave it in because that's my own awkwardness. But no, it was just, I didn't want to sit there and, in case you shared the story on the podcast, be like, no, there wasn't like a naked kid, but I think there was a kid in underwear in that commercial. I don't know. It was the 90s. Underwear.
Yeah. Strange time. It was Michael Jordan. Weird. Yep. Hanes chose me before Michael Jordan. That part is staying in. Anyway, I weighed in today at 194, not happy about it. My goal is to get to 175 by the end of season 2. I say that not knowing how many episodes season 2 is going to be, or when that actually is.
True Detective. We got a 6-episode mini season coming up here.
Yikes! Yeah. So my goal is to get down to 175. I've got 19 million pounds to go, and I'm not happy with where I am. I've not been good about exercising. I've had a lot of opportunity to eat my feelings lately without getting too deep into that, but I've definitely found myself bored eating and sad eating. So I need to find another way to process bad days without stuff in my gut. So that's where I'm at, 194 today, February 22nd, 2024. Got to be better.
Yeah, I am at 185.4 with my last weigh in, which is, I think, 2 pounds down from where we ended season 2, which over the course of 3 months is like fine. I'm going to pat myself on the back just fine. I have not been making a concerted effort to cut calories. And there were a couple of reasons behind that. I think there's a little bit of a lost impetus of like not having the check-ins. But I think part of it was just because like I was going down and then the holidays hit and I knew my weight was going to fluctuate and I didn't want to feel the pressure of failing. Because if I failed, consistently because there's always Christmas cookies around or whatever, I didn't want to miss my calorie goals or be fixated on the scale and watch the scale go up and drift into some bad habits. And then that led me to like sort of drifting out of the habit of regularly calorie counting. That said, some of the things that I gleaned before calorie counting and after calorie counting, like having done calorie counting for about 3 months and also challenging myself to see how many times I can say calorie counting in this segment, it taught me some of the things, where my calories were coming from in an important way so that I could, I still do the same thing of like, I have a consistent breakfast. I have one of 2 or 3 different things that I all know are going to get me at least 40 grams of protein and are going to be, 600 calories or less. And then I'm cooking the same dinners. And where I'm really trying to pull back is just like over snacking in the in-betweens and buying things like so far right now for the last few weeks, I've been on a good kick of buying a lot of apples. And I'm less focused on the actual, like, am I hitting my protein numbers? Am I under my calorie numbers? That will change now that we're back here. I'm going to go back into calorie counting mode. We're in late February. I've got my son's birthday this weekend. There are things that, I can get back in it and it shouldn't be, ideally, I'd like to be in a place where it's not like I'm taking a break from my diet. Now, granted, my initial goal is only 5 pounds away, right? So I'm 185. I want to be 180. I may change that to 175 after I get to 180, depending on how things go and how I'm feeling and looking. But the other thing that sort of happened for me over the past several months is I have been focused on my protein. I haven't really gained weight. In fact, I've lost 2 pounds and I've stayed really consistent at the gym. So I have noticed with a lot of that I am feeling more muscular than I was. And if you listen to us in season 1, you'll understand for me, that's been a big goal, that it's not pure losing weight for the sake of losing weight, but losing body fat. And if I weigh the same thing and I have more muscle tone, that's a good visual representation that I feel like I'm going in the right direction. And it's validating that, I'm not just like over here stuffing my face with potato chips until the point that I gain 20 pounds and say, oh, well, I just fell off the wagon a little bit. So I feel better.
Yeah. I think one thing, and I was, no action was taken after I made this realization, but I will say that I have leaned on a couple crutches all at once. Mm-hmm. I stopped going to the gym because of the pandemic and I didn't want to get sick. Mm-hmm. Then my wife started going back to work and she leaves before the girls wake up. So as somebody who is only better, who's usually, my best workout trends have been if I wake up first thing in the morning and I get it out of the way, because as the day gets later, I'm less likely to exercise. So
sure.
my thought was, I'd never make it back in time. Then it was, well, I bought this home gym equipment. I can go running, by not going back to the gym, I'm saving money. And then it was, I wanted to do it at this time in the day. And then this meeting came up. So there's about 4 different reasons that I lean on to be bad about exercising. And I need to make a conscious effort to, stop using that. Like, my wife needs to get out the door by roughly between 6:35 and 6:40 to make her train to get to work on time.
Right.
The girls usually sleep till about 7. So if the gym opens at 5, I, in theory, can work out for 30 to 60 minutes before she goes. You know what I mean? And I just need to do it. So
yeah, I mean, that's really easy to say. 6.5 hours away from 5 a.m. as we speak. 6 hours and 27 minutes. I mean, it's really easy. It's really easy to say. And I had some periods in my life where I was going to the gym and getting to the gym, 6 o'clock, 6:30 kind of thing, eating a Cliff Bar or something like that as my breakfast, and then powering through the gym. And now, I don't know. I just think I am so much more on a road of sustainability, of I want to do the thing that I think I can do a year from now, and I can envision myself doing for a year from now. And then I just remind anybody listening that I think the fact of the matter is, you nailed it with how you're processing your busy days and hitting, not hitting calorie marks, right? That's going to make a much bigger difference on your end results. The fitness is nice and you should do it and everybody should do it kind of thing. But you go burn 300 calories on a run and then overeat 600 calories of snacks. It's really, really easy to eat 600 calories. It's not always that easy to burn 600 calories.
Right.
Just through one workout, right? More dedicated steps throughout the day could help and things like that. But I think, building that sustainability is super key. And I think a lot of people, when I heard a fitness influencer that I follow talking about the concept where it's yes, it's calories in, calories out. It's very simple. And what everybody in the comments is going to hear is it's really easy. No, I'm saying the mathematical formula is easy. I can calculate it fairly easily within a rough approximation. The doing it is really hard, right? And so I don't want to come on here and make anybody ever feel well, I counted my calories and I got it done. And it's hard. And it's not even just I'm doing a pretty good job of not gaining weight, of maintaining my weight just off my intuition. And I feel great about that. Half the reason I haven't been aggressively tracking my calories is because I just forget. If you look in my log over the past couple of weeks, I have 9 breakfasts logged and 5 lunches logged and then no dinners. And I just fall off of actually doing that part of it.
Right.
Because I go to do it and then somebody pings me on my computer and I jump into a meeting and then it's lost.
Yeah.
And it's done. And I'm so far removed from the meal that I don't remember what exactly I ate necessarily in that moment, when I ate it, or that I did or did not log it.
Yeah. And let's be honest, like you said, it is currently 10:36 p.m. Eastern. I am not going to be at the gym at 5 a.m. Tomorrow. In fact, my gym membership is still technically on pause. I haven't renewed it yet since I've had that big epiphany. All I'm saying is I have now identified what's been holding me back, and I know what I can do to be better. And if that means, if we're regularly recording at 9 p.m. on Thursday nights, maybe my Friday workout is not, first thing in the morning. But what I do need to do most days a week, especially the 3 days a week the 4 days a week that I am home and not just the only one around my kids, is to take advantage of those opportunities, build it into my schedule, not let all the things I mentioned above get in the way of what I need to do, so that somebody else is not talking to my daughter about my death. Boom.
Yeah.
Brought it back to the theme of the episode.
I would say it's a good tip. You know, I don't want to drag this segment out, but that reminded me of during the pandemic, right? As I've mentioned, if nobody knows, I'm actually in a home gym right now recording. It's where I record. It's my wife's day-to-day office. There's like dumbbells and resistance bands on the wall. There's actually a bench behind me on the floor. But when we were in the pandemic, and I, like you, paused my gym membership, and then I went back at the start of 2023 to the same gym. But in the middle, I was using this, and we had made this during the pandemic. But because it was my wife's office, I had to essentially schedule a time on her calendar that I could use her office for my workout. And so maybe I had 11 to 12 as my workout block. I'd come out here because she was open, and I had to come out here. I had to do it because she was packing up all her stuff to move out of my way, to be gracious enough to let me work out. And then I had to get in and I had to get it done because she would have a meeting or something coming on the other end, and I need to get out of her studio, office space, what have you. And I think if you did that with what you're talking about, the times you're not solo parenting, you essentially say, hey, you can use your wife like as an accountability partner and say, hey, I'm planning to work out from 5:15 to 6 o'clock tonight. Can you watch the girls? She's committed. She's rearranged her schedule to be solo parenting and not worrying about anything else at that time, to enable you to do your workout. And then you feel the pressure of like, okay, this other person has rearranged their schedule so I can do the workout. I better get off the couch, right? And that could potentially work. Maybe it won't. Maybe it works for some of you, but I have found that having that accountability partner in some regards of like, hey, I'm moving my schedule around here to help you work out because I'm committed to helping you. Will you please do the work? Can be a nice motivator. And that really helped me building my consistency at a time because of COVID that I had gotten really inconsistent.
It's a good idea. I will consult with her and see how to make that work. And well, everybody, we hope you enjoyed the premiere of season 2. As always, I'm Ethan. This is Alex. And thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. We hope to see you next week.
I have the ability now with this new season where I get to play our outro music on command. And I just got the idea that I might do an Oscar style play you off if you ever take too long on the outro stuff. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.